this way and that in order to find the safest passage along the rough lane. The other, a shorter, heavier individual, followed a few steps behind and carried a bulky bag over one shoulder.
"Come on, Bill said. "Come to Daddy, you naughty children."
Matt felt cool breath on his cheek as the sergeant whispered close to his ear. The two figures seemed to be taking an eternity, but finally they were at the broken and dilapidated bridge that crossed the drainage ditch that surrounded the cottage. Just a moment or two more and they would have them. Matt tensed. He could hardly wait to hear the click of the ratchet as his handcuffs secured themselves to the criminal's fleshy wrists. The hand on his shoulder suddenly tightened its grip.
"What the—"
The men had stopped. One knelt down on the frail wood, then pulled sharply back and grabbed at his friend. There was a muffled shout. Then the other man moved forward, peered over the bridge, and recoiled back in the same manner. As Matt and the sergeant stood stock still and watched, the two suspected drug dealers turned on their heels and fled back up the incline. This time there was apparently no thought of danger and no care for personal safety. They slipped and slid on the wet grass, but still ran as if pursued by demons.
"Radio uniform, quick! Let's get down there and see what the devil's going on."
The sergeant broke cover and ran towards the bridge. "All units, attention drawn to two men, suspected drug dealers, on the Gibbet Fen marsh path, heading up towards the seabank. Apprehend and detain," Matt shouted into his radio as he ran after his friend. As he approached the edge of the bridge, an arm shot out and stopped him in his tracks.
"Dear God in heaven."
"Sarge?" The arm slowly dropped down, allowing him access to whatever horror his sergeant had seen. Matt felt a coldness slither between his shoulder blades as he stared over the splintery planks of rotting wood. Below him in the shallow, reed-tangled water was the naked body of a boy. It took Matt a few moments to assimilate what he was looking at. His flashlight and the weak glow from the moon made the surreal scene seem too weird to comprehend. Maybe it was a mannequin, a tailor's dummy. Surely a youngster's body could not be so impossibly white. Could it? He stared harder. No matter how much he wanted it to be, this was no mannequin. He looked around helplessly and saw that his sergeant had abruptly returned to consciousness and was barking orders into his radio.
"Get hold of D.I. Raymond immediately. We are going to need the full team out here, and forensics. Oh, and a van load of uniforms to secure the area, okay?"
Now Matt could do nothing but wait. There would be no heroic wading into the brackish dike and dragging the lifeless boy from the water. No frantic pumping his young chest or desperately trying to refill his flaccid lungs with air. It wasn't that he wouldn't have tried, of course he would. It was the fact that the youngster was secured firmly and purposefully beneath the water level. His thin arms were tied to the heavy wooden stanchions that supported the bridge with lengths of barbed wire. In fact, he was snared in a tangled cocoon of the vicious fencing, and the wire that held his feet was weighted by heavy pieces of concrete. Matt dropped to his knees, as close to the edge of the bridge as he dared, and stared down at the boy's face. Maybe it was because the boy was about the age of his best mate's son, Harry. Maybe it was because, like Harry, the lad was thin and lanky, with hair too long to be cool. Whatever. This one affected him differently to anything else he'd ever seen. And he'd seen plenty of bodies. Old ones, young ones, burnt ones, meat puzzles from the railway tracks. He'd coped with it all. Until now. He swallowed back a sob. He can't be more than 11 or 12, can he?
"Looks that way."
Bill's voice crackled with emotion.
"So I guess this is number 3.
He knelt awkwardly down next to Matt.
"It's been 6 months since the last poor kid. I really thought the murdering bastard had either topped himself or buggered off out of the area when things got too hot. Can you see if his signature mark is on the boy?"
Matt shone his torch down into the water. "I think so, Sarge." He swallowed bile and tried not to heave. It was hard to see between the weeds and the strands of wire. "Yes, it's there." On the front of the boy's naked shoulder was a symbol carved into the young flesh. Matt had seen it before in the other 2 victims. No one